Hi guys, welcome back to another video for Twisted Dice. I'm Aceface and I'm coming back to you with some more Tyranid tactics today. And we've got a bit of an interesting one. We're going to review a recent GT winning Tyranid list. We're going to break it down, tell you why potentially it was so successful, so you can have a look at it and think about it for your next Tyranid list. Also talk about a few things that it might have found difficult, and ways that potentially it could be countered. So hopefully this will be an interesting video for you. If you do enjoy it, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a big thumbs up, and let us know what you think is the strongest Tyranid list at the moment. So let's jump in and talk about this list. So first of all, credit to Matt Evans, who created this list. He's also got his own YouTube channel, which I think is called Into the Hive Mind. I will put a link for that channel in the description below so you can go over and check him out. And as always, please do let him know that Ace sent you. Give him a big subscribe. I know he'll appreciate it. So let's jump in and talk about this list. So let's start off with the list itself. It is headed up in a Kraken battalion by the Swarm Lord and a Brood Lord. So both these units, super quick, even quicker in Kraken, gives them the ability to really get across the board, hit pretty hard. They've got psychic support. The Swarm Lord has his very important ability, the Hive Commander, to be able to spring shot units into danger wherever he wants them. So super strong HQ slots. Moving into troops, he's gone for 2 units of Rippers, 1 unit of 4 and 1 unit of 3. Obviously, Rippers are very useful, versatile unit that you can chuck on an objective. They can deep strike in. They're not great at scoring that many of the secondaries, but they're still a useful unit and do give you some abilities there. We've then got 2 units of Devourer Gaunts. So this is, Termagants with Devourers, or the classic Devil Gaunts is what people like to call them. So we've got unit of 20, unit of 21. These are amazing at killing things like Poxwalkers, Guardsmen, Eldar, anything that's like T3, this just melt. So they're great against Jakari. They're really good against so many other of the up and coming armies that are depending on fast moving, soft but heavy hitting units. These guys deal a lot of damage against them. Right. Then into the elite slots, we've got 2 Lictors. So Lictor's one of the best units in the Tyranid Codex, amazing at holding secondary objectives, super cheap, super cheerful, absolute game-winning units. Never leave home without them. We've got 2 of them in this list. Then the battalion is finished off by 2 of the Jimacarons. These guys are super strong. They hit like an absolute ton of bricks in combat. They are majorly quick. Really like them. They're fairly resilient as well. So really like the Jimacarons. They're becoming a absolute strong staple of any combat orientated Tyranid list. And the list is finished by a super heavy auxiliary, which is the Harridan, which is the huge, great big space dragon gargoyle thing, which is one of my favourite models in the Tyranid range. I always have loved this guy. My one very rarely sees the battlefield, so I'm excited to maybe crack him out again and see just how well he does. And if you've not seen the Harridan in game, I'll just go through briefly what the Harridan is. So he is a 35 wound, massive, super heavy, monstrous creature. He also counts as aircraft as well. So he has hard to hit and supersonic built in. So he has his minimum, maximum movements. So super quick across the board. He is toughness 8, strength 8. He has got 5 attacks with a ballistic skill and a weapon skill of 3+, which is pretty solid stat line. And yeah, 3+ armor save. So he then is armed with 2 biocannons. So they've got 8 shots, heavy 8, and they are strength 10. And they do 3 damage each. So pretty good damage. And yeah, so he's got 2 of those. So 2 lots of 8, strength 10 shots. Nothing to be sneered at there. In combat, he's got his monstrous scything talons, which are +2 strength, so taking them to strength 10. And then they do a big flat 3 damage. So they're really strong. So he's a pretty solid monster. He's kind of more resilient in many ways than a knight because of his amount of wounds. He also is great in combat. He doesn't have obviously many attacks, so he doesn't want to get bogged down. He has no way of kind of slashing through things or stomping, but he can hit something incredibly hard in combat, and he's also great at shooting. So he's quite a versatile big unit. He is over 700 points, which is the big caveat. He is a huge amount of your army, and obviously if you lose him quickly, you're then playing with sort of almost half an army, which is the big challenge when you go for something that's as expensive as the Harridan. But what in this particular list Matt has given is he's given him the 5+ invulnerable save and the ability basically not to degrade. So you have to get him very low before he starts to go onto his other brackets, which makes him even more viable. So you really have to get this guy low before he stops dealing a huge amount of damage. So I spoke to Matt a little bit about this list, what was the kind of game plan and what were his matchups. So we'll talk through them. So his game plan very much is a target saturation, a target overload. So you're just throwing lots of incredibly strong units on top of your opponent and making them deal with them. And particularly with the Harridan, you've got that scare factor of this huge, great big monster that's flying across the board super quick. And you've got to kind of like decide what you want to do. Do you want to deal with him? Do you want to deal with these really quick Dimmacarons? The Swarm Lord that's coming up to support the Brood Lord who can just go in and clear out characters easy. You know, you've got lots of targets, high value targets that are coming at your opponent, and none of them are particularly easy to deal with quickly. So that's the kind of strategy. It does fit quite nicely within the cap system. So you've got a lot of control there with, you know, gaunts, lictors, rippers, some versatility there to be able to do a good job. You've got a ton of power, however you decide to use that, whether you decide to use that much more of a defensive kind of the Harridan at the back, or whether what looks to be as just throw it in their face. And then in that case, you've got tons of aggravate. So it does fit the cap system pretty well. So it's solid and ticks all the boxes, but very interesting to see the Harridan on the board. So we're going to go through his matchups, and you might well think at this point, oh, well, it's, you know, he's obviously got pretty lucky with his matchups because that list's not that great. I hate to differ. These lists that he came across were solid lists. Obviously, we don't know the players. We don't know exactly the details of each game. But these lists are not too shabby at all. So his first game was against Blood Angels, and it's typical Sanguinian Guard, heavy list, Death Company, super aggressive, nasty list that actually has got the ability to do an awful lot of damage super quick. But what Matt does have is he does have a screen, and from what I gather, the plan was very much to sort of screen out his combat units, make them take the bait almost, kind of hold back, and then hit him in the counter, which just sounds like what happens. And he was able to hit his high elite troops the first opportunity so hard that then he didn't have the opportunity to then be able to hold objectives and be able to win the mission. So I think that's how he overcame him. It's always a real difficult one when you're coming across a list that has such high value targets. You just want to get into them because you know how much damage they're going to do. But by the sounds of things, the Blood Angels took the bait quite heavily, and that meant that the Tyranids were able to take it. So then, if that's not a hard enough list in itself, because the Blood Angels are pretty tough going, he then went up against Salamanders. And one thing Salamanders are do not find hard is dealing with big targets. Obviously, they pack tons of Melter, which is super dangerous for anything like the Dimmacarons or the Harridan or the Swarm Lord. So it sounds like the target was very much, they had attack bikes, because they quite often do. The target was the attack bikes, they needed to go, and then obviously the Eradicators. I think by the sounds of things, it was the hammer and anvil deployment, and obviously Melter's relatively short range. He was able to out deploy with a lot of his stuff, and then in the counter was able to take out the attack bikes with the Harridan, using the ability to pack up the damage to 4 damage a pop rather than 3, and just absolutely annihilation those attack bikes. Once they're gone, again, it just carries on. It's just really difficult then for him to be able to deal with the Harridan. The Harridan can just go around, and against Marines, when they're quite elite, those Harridan guns will destroy Marines so quickly. You'll very, very quickly go through their army, and there's very, very little they can do about it because of your great movement. So it works really well, and obviously Dimmacarons are going to go in and take out a unit apiece each turn until they're got rid of. So that's pretty strong. We've then got Custodes. Custodes. I think I've got it right. I've got to be really careful because I keep getting told off by calling them Custodes. It's Custodes. Custodian players get very, very upset with you calling them Custodes. So Custodes, you play Custodes, and this I think is an incredibly hard matchup, really strong. I think though, by the sounds of things, he got a little bit lucky, because Custodians do hit extremely hard. Custodians, I know now I've got it in my mind, Custodes, but he was able to beat that. He's getting his elite army. He does have the ability to do an awful lot of damage. If he managed to find his hits and the Custodes player does not make his saves, they're going to go down pretty quick. But again, what the Tyranids do have is they have movement seriously on their advantage, because everything in that army is so quick or has movement shenanigans, so everything can get where it wants. And the Custodes just are pretty slow. Sounds like he had the Dreadnoughts, and the Dreadnoughts, as we know, are super strong. So they were the target first of all. Again, once you get rid of them, then the army starts to become quite easy to deal with. So I think the Harridan went after them. I think it killed one straight away by the sounds of things. And then there wasn't enough damage to put back on the Harridan to deal with him. And then you start to ride through their army. So I thought that was very interesting. But that on paper is a very, very difficult matchup. So that was game 3. And then there was Death Guard. I believe there was Death Guard. I'm thinking there was Death Guard. I might be going mad. Yeah, there was Death Guard. But no Mortarion again. I don't understand why people aren't playing Mortarion in Death Guard armies. For me, that's a massive mistake. But, you know, because with Mortarion, you've actually got a real problem to deal with if you're playing elite armies. But for some people, seem to think he's not great to take. Don't know what they're thinking. But anyway, he was able to overcome Death Guard. And then he played, I think, one of his teammates in the final, which was against Orcs. And the Orcs were also taking some of the kind of the smasher tanks, the kind of super heavy tanks. But, you know, I still think it's just the shooting from the Harridan's too much for them to be able to cope with. It sounds like it was a pretty close game, and he was just able to take it. But, you know, with the movement shenanigans, again, he's able to overcome it. I think it would have been potentially a very different story if the Orcs were playing the custom Stomper. I think if he was playing the custom Stomper, I don't think the Tyranids win that game, because the custom Stomper with the lifter droppers just picks up the Harridan in a turn. There's pretty much nothing he can do. Doesn't matter, he got hard to hit. He's just going to decimate him. And in fact, if the Stomper rolls hot and he can't be hidden because the Stomper's got such good visibility, the Stomper has the ability to potentially take out the Harridan and at least one Dimmacaron on his own. I've come across it myself. Yeah, so I think the Orc player, potentially, if he had the Stomper, it would have been different. Also, if he was running mass smasher guns, might have been slightly different as well, because the smasher guns deal with stuff pretty effectively, I found. But still, he was able to overcome his teammate and win to go 5-0. So that is incredibly strong. Just thought we'd talk about, before we finish the video, we'd talk a little bit about potential limitations for the list. So I've talked a little bit about the Stomper. Also, anything else that can deal with a huge amount of damage straight off the bat. So if anything has the ability to shoot, so you know, if we talk about the new hotness being Jakari, the normal Jakari builds I think potentially aren't able to deal with that. But what is if they go Dark Lance heavy, and there is the ability to run lots of boats with lots of Dark Lances, and again the Dark Lances will chew through the big guys pretty quick, and that's his vulnerability within this list. His vulnerability is if something can get at his big stuff and hit it hard enough, he then doesn't have that much after that. So he's very much depending on 5-up invulnerable saves and pretty high toughness. Otherwise, he can start getting melted quick. And as I said, if something goes for that Harridan and able to take it out, then you've got a big problem, and that's the big limitations. There is that risk element, which is why, you know, it can win a GT. It probably will struggle to win a major, because you're just more likely to come across an army that's tuned up to deal with big stuff. And I also worry that people seem to be steering clear of Mortarion for some stupid reason. I don't understand why. But again, we've got Be'lakor coming along. So the more big models, excuse me, start to come to the table, the more people start to gear up to deal with big stuff. And if you've got the ability to deal with this stuff, then potentially you're able to deal with the Harridan. And if you can take out the Harridan in a turn, that list is in trouble. Matt, in his communications to me, very much said around the sort of strategy is obviously it's target overload, but also there's a little bit around there's very few armies that have the ability to deal with a Harridan in one turn. And if they can't deal with it in one turn, then generally he's able to win, because the Harridan doesn't really degrade enough. And then he's able to then do an awful lot of damage, and the opponent's right on the back foot. So that's kind of how the list works. But if you've got something that can deal with the Harridan consistently and reliably, then that's when you've got a bit more of a problem with that list. So I don't know necessarily is the absolute strongest Tyranid list, because it's, in my mind, maybe too many eggs in one basket. But it's so good. It's so good. And more than it's so good, it just looks so much fun. So I will definitely be trying that list, Matt. I'll be stealing your list, and I'll be giving that a go, hopefully in a battle report, to show you what it does, because I can't wait for an excuse to get that model out on the table. But yeah, it looks loads of fun, super fun list, super cool, and obviously super powerful. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and please do jump over and give some love to Matt over at Into the Hive Mind. And until the next video, I'm Ace Face, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.